Thank you, Father, for this day, for this special conversation. Thank you, audience, for being here. I, with all my heart, believe that every single solitary listener will gather wisdom and be inspired to make changes that are necessary in your lives. I believe that if you share this episode with others, they will thank you. I'm so grateful we're here with Tracy Doyle, author, incredibly successful uh, business person turned, I'm going to say counselor. She is not, she will tell you she is not a licensed counselor, but I am holding a book right here. Tracy Doyle, Life Storms, Finding Your Clear Sky. Y'all can see all my highlighters and notes. I'm covered in chills. I'm not finished, and I wish we had time. Maybe what we'll do is I'll do it in my book study group. Welcome, Tracy. Please tell the audience, give your um, give your description of who you are because I cannot do that. I can't do it justice.
Oh, thanks, Carol. And I'm just so grateful to be here. Thank you so much for having me on the show. So yeah, I mean, I am a currently I'm a resilience coach, and I'm proud to say an award-winning author because my book just received a silver award for BookFest in three categories. I'm still in awe over that. And I'm a former CEO. I built and led an award-winning multi-million dollar business, and I led it, gosh, for over 20 years. And together with my team, as a successful CEO, together with my team, we generated over $100 million in business over 20 years. So
So
um, I've
fabulous.
had an incredible career. But I wrote the book 3 years ago because I burned out really bad. And I went on a long journey to overcome that. And I recovered from it. And I was like, I know how to handle my life, right? And I'm all happy. But actually, 5 years ago now, because it's 2026, I had to answer a calling, right? My sister is disabled from mental illness, and her daughter needed help. She was 14, caregiving her mom. So I uprooted my life, and I moved to South Carolina to care for my sister. And that's really when I don't want to say I realized my calling. I always knew my purpose was to help others. But as my burnout symptoms started to come back, I realized the best way to really realize my purpose was to pour my heart out into the book and share with others what I had learned to help myself, because I believed in that moment that helping someone else would help me. And that's sort of why I'm full circle. I studied psychology and counseling. I have my degree there. I wanted to start my career there, but here I sit full circle as a resilience coach today.
Just incredible. And I want to first of all point out, because I know so many in the audience, you uprooted your life to help your niece and your sister.
Hmm.
And there are, and within our audience, so many incredibly loving, kind people that do this. And then all of a sudden, there's this journey that takes place.
Hmm.
And you, of course, after being so successful, you could have said no.
Hmm.
You said yes. And that'll be another discussion for another time. But the audience knows, just saying yes, so often we're being nudged by the Holy Spirit to say yes. And with all my heart, I believe we're all called. The one thing we do, the foundation of what we have in common is to help others.
Hmm.
I'm going to, I have so many questions, but I am going to very carefully, because of our limited time, I will tell you, and I believe, Tracy, this will be true for others. I found that you and I have so much in common. We giggled, y'all, pre-show, all the way down to things about our teeth. I mean, I know that seems crazy, but it is true. And I I'm going to read a little sentence
Mhm,
from, and I'm going to go to the beginning because you need to get in touch with Tracy. Trust me, after you hear this, you're going to. I was drowning in self-doubt, afraid I wasn't good enough, overwhelmed because I was doing it all myself, and angry because I never said no.
mhm,
I felt like I was a human doing, not a human being. You had an incredible friend that inspired you and walked you through a framework to manage your thinking,
mhm,
as our thinking is 98% of the battle. I
mhm,
I believe. And I know that your friend was also something I'm very familiar with and love everything about it was Alcoholics Anonymous.
mhm,
And from that, well, let's just start with that. You were just doing, and you were doing a lot,
mhm,
but
mhm,
you became overwhelmed, which led to resentment. Tell us
mhm,
a little bit about that because I know so many people, that's where they are.
mhm. Yeah, so, burnout starts out looking like stress, right? So, I'm the first in my family to go to college. And so I'm a first generation student. And so when I came out of school, I had all this, pressure in my mind to succeed, right? And so, and why? Why did I want to succeed? Because I grew up believing that I had to sacrifice myself for my family and for my job, and for the people in my life, like my relationship. I had this ingrained belief that I had to do that, and it comes from some early life experiences in my story. You see, my mom was mentally ill, and she, didn't have treatment because back then there was no diagnosis for bipolar disorder.
Mm-mm.
And sadly, with mental illness, and I studied psychology because I wanted to understand my mom, right? Sadly with mental illness, it's about making bad choices sometimes when you're not treated. And and it's not that you're bad as a person, it's sometimes you just make bad choices. And my mom made a bad choice. She married an alcoholic. That was probably very familiar to her because she grew up in an alcoholic family. Her dad, my grandfather, was alcoholic. And they lost everything as a result of his addiction. But here she is. She marries this man. She had me as a teenager, so I'm 7 years old. And, you know, basically, we came into his life at his bottom, right? And so the ravages of addiction, for anyone who knows it, his addiction took everything from us within a few years. I mean, they had two children together, my sister and brother. And then we were without food, without running water, without clean clothes, without health care. I mean, it was just really, really bad. And I was the only one who was showing up because my mom couldn't handle it. She was melting down. So coming out of school, I'm like stressed. I got to do it. I got to do it. I got to do it. Right. And then I get, the job. I get the big job, and now whoa. I have a free car in the job I got. I got a free car. I'm making a great salary, and with that came overwhelm. Right, because
Mhm.
the pressure to perform was on. And then I'm managing my mom because my stepfather died 4 years later in that marriage, and so now I'm still her caretaker. But meanwhile, my sister started having the same disability as my mother. Hers was a little worse. And she had two kids that I assumed custody of. So here I am, and now meanwhile, I'm trying to have my own life, and I bought a house and I have a relationship, and I'm juggling it all, right?
Mm, mm,
And where did that take me? Well, that took me on the burnout journey. So what burnout looks like is it starts to look like conflict, right? And what I mean by that is always, you're doing, and then you start to believe no one sees what I do. No one understands me. If they just did what I said, then I wouldn't have reacted like that. Then I'm up all night. I'm up all night because I don't know how I'm going to do all this, right? I'm imploding on the inside. I'm exploding on the outside.
ah,
And those implosions and explosions, for many of us, if we get help, we can stop it. But I didn't. I pushed, and I pushed. And where I got to was self-doubt. Like, I don't even know what's real and right anymore because no one understands me. And and I can't fight anyone anymore. I'm like, and so that took me to a breaking point.
Mm-hmm.
And that breaking point was, it literally was, I mean, I can remember it like it was yesterday. It was December 21st. It was 1999. I'm like getting ready for work. I get a glimpse of myself in the mirror. Like I didn't even know myself anymore. Like my eyes are hollow. My spirit is dim. I just looked so like empty. I was just completely bankrupt. And and inside my head, I'm like, you know what? Because it's around the holidays. If you got good and drunk, maybe
Yeah.
you crash the car.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I went through with that. And so, you
Mm.
know, like I was jolted awake that night by someone banging on my car window and, screaming, like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I'm
Mm.
like, "What? Like, what have I done? What have I done? Like, oh my God." And, and then I'm crying and I'm like, "How did I get so lost?" And I'm telling the police, like, "I can't handle my life anymore." And I'm crying. And I just said, I can't take it anymore. And, they were very kind. But that next day, that guilt and shame, it was like a fight, like my head's screaming at me, like, "Tracy, how could you do that?" But my heart's going, "Tracy, you're still here." And that
Uh,
was really my first real lesson because
wow.
I realized that sacrificing myself didn't mean abandoning myself. It meant I had to put myself first
Right.
while I was managing it all. And for me, that meant getting help. So, what felt like 10 years, because I started off going for medical, I needed to get on antidepressants because I was suicidal. I went to therapy to work on trauma. So throughout this process, it took about 3 years into it. I finally opened up because I'm reading all these self-help books again, and I want to understand how to change and what to do. And this one book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Susan Jeffers, she talks about it's so important to be vulnerable. And you see, I was a one-way mirror because I grew up believing that, like, if I just sacrifice myself for everyone, then maybe I would belong, right?
Mm.
And so I'm starting to talk to my one friend who worked in pharma. She was in a 12-step program. And she said to me, "Tracy, your problem is your thinking."
Mm.
And I'm like, "What?" Right?
Yeah.
She said, "You change your thinking, you change your life. You see, your life experiences shape your thinking. And if you recognize how they shaped your thinking, you can change."
Mm.
That was a foreign concept. Someone who studied psychology, I was like, what do you mean by that? Right? Because I understood now. I was in therapy and I had been through like training, and I understood how my life experiences, affected me, but not like this. Not to the point of being reactive, not to the point of pushing myself to the point of no return, and giving and giving and giving and giving, right? And thinking at some point I'll belong, right? So she's the one who showed me that. She showed me that, that belief that sat in my unconscious mind was, I don't belong. And if I sacrifice myself, then maybe I will. That was super powerful. So she, go ahead.
Incredible. Yeah. And you know what? I want to say thank you to your friend and thank you to any and all that share through 12-step programs. They call it stinking thinking.
Mm-hmm,
They'll
mm-hmm,
say, oh, goodness, this is recognizable. You've
mm-hmm.
got stinking thinking. So, you know what? Thank you, Father, for incredible friends and people that will stop us in our tracks and say, wait a minute, you can do this. And also, I want to point out something that you have said that's so important to the entire audience and to whomever you share this with. And I'm speaking to you, you wonderful audience. She had enough sense to get help. Getting help is your first step,
That's right.
is the most courageous step. Meds are sometimes necessary
Mhm,
and accept those. I have a friend that said, oh gosh, if I get hooked on the meds? And we
mhm,
talked about this recently, and they said, trust me, You're not going to get hooked on the meds. And if you do, we'll deal with it. But right now, you have to get through the day.
That's right. I mean, and I was on antidepressants for about 18 months, and then that was
Yes,
it. I have not been on them ever since, right?
that's right.
But
And
I had to get that adjustment, right?
yes,
In my brain. I mean, because all the
yeah.
trauma I endured, just, I didn't understand it at the time. Even though like I said, I studied all this stuff, I was resistant to meds.
Yes.
I knew I was suicidal for 6 months before I went through with it. Right?
Oh,
I mean, I wanted to die, but basically, I was not willing to tell anyone about it because to me, vulnerability meant weakness.
and now we know it means strength. It
Courage
means
and strength.
courage. It means bravery.
Mhm,
And everybody, let's become curious rather than judgmental of ourselves and others. So please, if you need help, please reach out, please. And if you need meds, please get on them. These
mhm.
mental health professionals, they know.
That's
Uh,
right.
so then we move, and I'm just, y'all have, look, I have so many things highlighted, but I'm going to throw out a few things such as collective wisdom. I love that you share, whether it's through authors, William James, Carl Jung, Maslow. You go on and on with this collective information, inclusive of your life experiences, whether those be from your professional experiences, from your friends, and you have developed, and I love the name, the Aurora method. And of course, you talk about it later, but Aurora meaning, coming from Latin aurora, but dawn, and
Mhm,
from darkness to light. What a beautiful name. I just applaud you for that. Tell us, as I was going through, and y'all, I'm just talking about at the very beginning, you get to, and I love this. You quote William James right off the bat before the introduction. The greatest discovery of any generation is that a human can alter his life by altering his attitude.
mhm, mhm.
Now, what you have so beautifully shared with us, and I thank you so much for this. Again, you had to at least your mind shift had to first be interrupted. You needed meds, you needed help
Mhm,
so that you could then embrace, and you created this method that now is going to take you through this mindset shift.
mhm.
Correct?
Yes. You know, because I was in the pharmaceutical industry, and I, had some clinical people that I worked with, I wanted to understand burnout and I wanted to understand how to fix it, right? How to change it. And all the literature, you can go to any data source, it gives you one solution: change your mindset, right? Now, when you're in the midst of burnout and you're like, I do everything, right? And I don't know how to stop it.
Yes.
First thing you say is how? How do I do that? So it starts with my friend. So she started showing me, how my life experiences shape my beliefs, and that these beliefs that sit in my unconscious mind were driving me, right? So I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, so that was self-knowledge. I understood. I'm like, okay, I get that. But what started to happen was I still kept doing it, right?
Mm.
And I'm like, how do you stop that, right? Being aware of it is one thing, but when you're in the midst of stuff like how do I say no to my mother? How do I do
Yeah.
this? Because I'd never said no. I was a people pleaser, right?
Mm.
How do you say no to your job? And what she talked to me about was there's fear underneath that. And she helped me see that when I'm afraid, I'll continue to do that. But then what I discovered was that, and this is where my psychology training comes in, what I realized is that Abraham Maslow, he's like a grandfather in psychology at this point.
Yes.
He basically said, and he has this hierarchy of needs, but let's just break it down. What he says is we have basic needs. We have basic needs for safety, basic needs for security, basic needs for belonging, and basic needs for our own realization, or as he says, actualization for who we want to be, right?
Mm. Hmm.
Anytime we're wounded, So any experience in our life, if we're wounded and we internalize it as a wound and we keep internalizing it the same way, depending on which need it stunts, we stay stunted. And
Mhm.
what does that mean? Well, if my belonging need, which mine was stunted because I was born out of wedlock, and there's a whole story in my book about what that experience was. I basically felt rejected by my stepfather's mother, and I internalized that, and that thing stayed with me my whole life until I finally shifted it. So, so if that need is stunted, that, what happens? Well, you're looking at life, as I like to say, through a straw, because Maslow says we live in lack. What does that mean? Well, we live focused on what we don't have.
Mm.
I don't have this. I don't have that. My husband doesn't this. My boss doesn't that. Whatever it is, right? My family doesn't support me. They don't do this. Lack. Or we live in discontent, which is basically, we're just not satisfied with anything anyone does for us. It's just never good enough.
Mm.
So when we're living in lack and discontent, and we don't know what need is stunted and what belief was created as a result of that need being stunted, what I call the reaction cascade happens, right? So here we are, a little trigger. We think people press our buttons. They don't. It's all inside, right? Little trigger out here happens. It stokes that belief. It ignites a limiting belief. I'm not good enough or I'm not worthy. Shoots to our feet, fear, right? And I like the work of Tony Robbins. He says, loss fear, fear of losing what you have, less fear, fear of being less than or getting less than we desire, or never fear, fear of never getting what we want. If you start thinking about the things that you say to yourself, it's always like, I'm never going to this, I'm never going to that. That's a never fear, right? Or you're comparing yourself to everybody, that's a loss fear, right? And if you're living in a place of I got to do and do and do and do and do, I'm sorry, that other one was a less fear, never
Yeah.
fear. That's a loss fear. I got to do and do and do because if I don't, I'm going to lose it. If I don't, I'm going to lose it, right?
Yeah.
So when you start to see how it plays out in life, you're like, wow, what else does it do?
Right.
I call this the city of limitation. It creates self-centered traits. And, I don't know about you, but if someone calls me selfish or self-centered, I'm like in your face, like, seriously, I do everything for everybody. Don't you know everything that I do? Don't you dare. But what I did was, when my friend talked to me about that concept, because I balked at that, what I realized was the work of Carl Jung is to uncover that unconscious belief. The work of Maslow was to look at, basically, your needs and what's stunted. But the work of like M. Scott Peck and William James really gets you to see how to break out of your own limitations in your own mind, right? Because think about it, if you're stuck inside the city of limitation, and let me give you what a self-centered trait looks like. Self-pity, you're absorbed with pity. If
Mm.
you're stuck in a trait,
Hard.
my big one was self-reliance because I felt like I had to do everything myself. Then I'm going to keep repeating doing everything for everyone because I keep thinking the trait that was developed in the presence of my fear is I have to do everything. No one else will do it. And there's so many of them. There's,
Yeah.
I call them the ishes, right? Because self dash
Yeah,
ish.
but I
But
love
what's the
it. You
ish,
give a
right?
list of many of the issues.
Exactly,
I
right?
love it.
Okay. So what happens? Well, when you're stuck in the city of limitation, think about it. You can't get out, which means you can't truly give and you
Mm-mm.
can't let anyone in because you
Mm.
can't really receive. And then if we take it spiritually, you're not really aligning with God, right? Because that's like I look at the work of, my one of my favorite books is it's a book that was written by Eric Butterworth called Discover the Power Within You. And he does a breakdown of the Sermon on the Mount.
Mm.
And what he shows you is that it's your thinking, and he speaks to what Jesus was teaching, like it's your thinking that blocks you from God. And so when
Mhm.
I understood the city of limitation and how the unconscious belief, the stunted need created the unconscious belief, and all of a sudden fear and self-centered traits happen, I'm like, okay, I see it now. I can name it now. How do I change it? And that's to me what the Aurora method's about. It's about helping you see it, name it,
Name it, see it, name it, how
and
to
change
change
it.
it.
That's right.
That I'm
That's it.
covered in chills.
That's it.
You got me at Sermon on the Mount, which we just did a study on that, and it is,
So good.
it's, I mean, whole different conversation that if we
Yeah.
start, I won't be able to stop. But I love this. See it, name it, change it.
Change it.
And what I love about, and you talk about this throughout, where, as far as I've gotten anyway, it's lasting change.
That's right.
And
Because once
that
it, Mhm.
is something I really want the audience to grasp. What Tracy has done here, she is talking about a method, a step-by-step method, and she'll tell you a little bit more about it for lasting change.
Mhm.
And I also want to bring back up, none of us want to think that we're selfish.
Mm-mm.
Whether we are or not, we need to figure it out. I think that all of us experience selfishness. I was horrified when I realized that I was selfish. I told somebody it was a very disappointing moment and a very important moment.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, and this takes commitment, it takes accountability to changing yourself. And
Yeah.
that's a big deal.
Well, yeah, I mean, and for me, like you said, when you hear that word selfish, everyone I know just they're like the wall goes up, right? My
Yeah,
wall went up. I'm like, how dare you? But what I want to impart on the audience is that selfish means absorbed in self, but the question is, what are you absorbed with? So
right.
that's why I call it the ish, because self-pity isn't the pity is the ish, right? Reliance is the ish. There's so many. Think about people who are self-righteous. You get
Oh,
into a fight to be right, right? And so you're absorbed with your way is the right way and not welcoming anyone else's approach or opinion, and it shuts people down. And what we don't recognize, one of my other favorite books is The Four Agreements by Don Miguel
ah,
Ruiz. And
yes.
he talks about metote, which basically means it's another way of saying self-centered, but he talks about it being enshrouded in like a fog and you can't see out and you don't see how you affect other people. And these self-centered traits, right, become the storm. They're the storm within us, and we act on them. So we're distorted from these wounds that we have. And many and I believe we're all wounded. We've all had experiences in our lives. It could be significant trauma for some of us. It could be just being, having very strict parents that we never felt like we could measure up to for others of us and everything in between. If it wounded us, it matters. Our wounds matter. And when
That's
we
right.
right, and when we see how it affects our thinking, meaning the self-centered traits they create, we don't see, sadly, how those traits affect others. And I do a big thing in my book where I show you if you're self-righteous, for example, and you're getting into fights to be right, you're perceived as being arrogant and opinionated and people pull away. And then
That's
you're
right.
like, why don't people want to talk to me anymore? What's wrong? Right? You don't understand it. You think you're just expressing your opinion. But if you're talking on top of someone, you're alienating yourself. If you're self-pitying, people will look at you as just being perpetually unhappy and they don't know what to do for you. So they pull away because they don't know how to satisfy you. There's another trait called self-effacing, which many women have, where we're voiceless. We don't want to rock the boat. Often we're people pleasers, right? So what do? We appear, we just don't want to rock the boat. We don't say anything. People think we're indifferent. We don't care. Meanwhile, we really care, right? So I
Uh,
mean, there's so many and the way they affect the outside person experiencing us. Once we can see that and understand it, that's what we're aiming to change. The fear, the self-centered trait, because as we shift that stuff inside, it affects all the dynamics on the outside. So changing the dynamics of our relationship starts inside of us.
and I know the audience is thinking, yes, I need to dive into here. I need to learn more. I need to read the book. Yes, I'm going to say you all do. And I'm also going to say that this brings up, and I know that the audience knows I speak about this wonderful Pema Chadron. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, But the entire premise is that we've got, when we take care of ourselves, which is what we are suggesting here, we are giving a gift to others. And when we help others, it's a gift to ourselves. So without taking care of ourselves, we are acting selfishly by doing all this yes, 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 help, 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 because we want to please, and that's how we feel validated.
Exactly.
And it is so important that we do this work. What we now need to move to, because of the limited amount of time, is Tracy, if the audience goes to your website, they can dive in and get some teasers about this. They can learn more about you. If you order, Life Storms, if you get this book, I believe that everyone is going to be excited. I certainly am. The next step after reading, downloading the information, doing some work, contact you. People can work, of course, one-on-one with you, but you are creating this incredible group experience. And tell the audience a little bit about your first group and how beautifully it has gone. And you've been surprised, I'm not, that it was even more dynamic than you thought. And from that, you are continuing to create more and more ways to do this work, this incredible work.
Yeah. So that's, there's so much to say about that.
I know.
The thing is that the one, I just want to say before I say anything about the group and the one-on-one is many of us don't understand how burnout affects they burn our relationships, right? And
Hmm.
we don't, and what I'm saying with all the ish stuff that I was just talking about is that's the stuff that perpetuates the what I call the conflict cycle. And we want to break free from that cycle. So if anyone's struggling with relationships, don't take it to the breaking point. That's where you want to interject right there and take action there and give yourself permission to do it. And I'm blessed that I've had women who have given themselves permission, and we worked in a group because I wanted to see what the group dynamic would feel like for women who feel so isolated and alone in their relationships. They feel misunderstood. They just feel so unheard. And yet they were afraid to be vulnerable. So I challenged them. And what we brought together was a small group of women. I don't want it to be too big because what we do in there is it's workshop style, right? Especially for us women who manage it all, right? Who has time for homework? I mean, I know I don't,
Nobody.
right? So it's workshop style. So we do workshops, we get to know each other. I like to do little small breakouts where we're sharing with each other, not about our life, but just who we are and things like that. And then our aspirations. But then I take you through the Aurora method, and each week we do various parts of it. So there's 4 parts to the Aurora method. The first part is really self-assessment. That's probably the most painful part because it's a kind and loving look back on your life and how your life experiences shaped you. But sometimes when you go back to that, like recently, I'm actually doing 2 groups. My second group, one person in there, she's an attorney, she's got a big job. She was like, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea how much this stuff affected me." Right?
Uh,
She just blurted it out right in the group like and she didn't get into what it was, but she was like, "Wow." Right?
yeah.
So she's going through it. So we do that first and we take our time through it. I spent a whole session just on the issues because naming those, it's not easy, right? And then from there, we then get emotional clarity. What do we do next? We do what I call the turnaround, which is really looking at our patterns and recognizing what we've been doing. The women in the group are like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that I was doing this. One particular person said, oh my gosh, all these years I was expecting my sister to do this for me. She felt like she never supported her, to support me and to do these things for me. And I've been looking at her like she never supported me. And what she realized was they lost their mom when they were young, and her
Mm.
sister was grieving too. but her sister was older, and she realized, wow, and how she pulled away, and how she had, was always at odds with her sister, but it was her own belief that no one supported me that did that. And then she was like, wow, right? So then what do we do after that? Well, after we do that, we first work on how do we manifest change? How do we start redirecting those issues?
Right.
How do
Right.
we redirect those beliefs? So that's the inner work. Then from there, we move into what I call mending, which is how do we build bridges back to the people in our lives? And I talk about what's called an acknowledgement conversation. How do
Mm.
we acknowledge the impact of our ish on people? Right. And I teach you how to have that conversation. And so by the end of the Aurora Method Academy, that's what I call it now, at the end of it, you're ready to go out and practice. And so for some, that practice might feel daunting. That's why I offer one-on-one coaching. And so, and the one-on-one for people who are just they're so burned out they don't want to be in a group. I take you individually through the Aurora method. And
Mm.
when you complete it again, if you feel you still need additional support for implementation on the method and the practice and staying accountable, then I'm here to help. So that's how I'm working with others. And it's just been just to see the breakthroughs, just in the self-assessment alone, people just, it's like, wow, I didn't understand it in the group setting, but my one-on-one settings, it's the most beautiful thing to see someone finally feel safe enough to actually share some things that really, really, really have been holding them back, but they've never really verbalized because they didn't think it was worth verbalizing, right?
Ah,
That's what we do to ourselves, ladies, right? So it's a beautiful experience for me, and giving back and pouring my heart into helping others break free from this, because once you do, the lasting change is you now have tools to practice daily. And it doesn't mean taking someone else's affirmation and putting it on your mirror. It means your own, and building your own affirmation and your own personal approaches to redirecting and resetting your thinking and your mindset.
which
That's
is so
it.
important because it's unique.
That's right. It's yours.
It's
It's
yours.
yours. It's no one
And
else's.
I am, it's just incredible from the beginning to the end. When I go to the very beginning, you knew you were overwhelmed. Many of us, we know when we're overwhelmed, but we really don't understand the definition of overwhelm.
Hmm.
So we can start, oh my goodness, and how overwhelm then trickles out and affects every relationship.
Hmm.
How the overwhelm has been building up since we were
Hmm.
kiddos.
Hmm.
I just, I know the audience is looking so forward to getting your book and to diving in to this work, contacting, I so appreciate what you're doing. It's seems to me it's your calling, you're growing your God-given gifts, and we all want to do that. And I just want to thank you. Any parting words before I bef-
Yeah. What I say to everyone is you're not broken. You're
Mm-mm.
brave, right? And all you need to do is give yourself permission to go for it. And when you do, life changes. I'm living proof of that. And if there's anyone struggling out there and you want to just chat about it, meetwithtracy.coach. Just go to meetwithtracy.coach. Schedule a complimentary 30-minute consultation so we can understand where you're at and if this would be the appropriate approach for you. Because I don't purport to be the be all end all. And given my training, of course, I've actually recommended people seek therapy first. Because what the work I do is more of a supplement to someone who's done therapy or someone who's currently in therapy working through things.
Incredible. Really and truly. Audience, okay. Telling you again, you matter. You're an incredible child of God. Your story matters, and you are loved by God.
Mhm.
Thank you, Father, for the day, for this conversation, for the work that Tracy is open for you to do through her. Thank you for this incredible audience. Thank you all so much. Have an incredible rest of your day or evening, and hook 'em.